Now, one of the key players at this year's IRMSA conference is professional services firm Marsh, and Spiros Fatouros, Chief Executive Officer, Marsh Africa, is going to address the all-important topic, cyber risk, reimagining resilience. I want to give you a taste of what is to come. Spiros, a very warm welcome to you. So a key speaker at the IRMSA conference, just to remind people of the dates, 29 and 30 September. Maybe just give us a teaser, if you can, some insight into the topic.
Great. Thank you, Jeremy. And thanks for taking the time for the conversation today. And firstly, I think just to highlight that Marsh is extremely proud again to be the main sponsor of the IRMSA conference this year. And I think like you highlighted, cyber risk, and reimagining resiliency. If we really think about cyber risk as a topic, and we refer to sort of the global risk report, which came out this year in collaboration with, or published by the WEF in collaboration with Marsh, and even IRMSA's risk report, I mean, cyber attacks remain a top business risk for companies year after year. And we see an increase in frequency, severity, and sophistication of these attacks. And I really think, top of that list from a cyber subsect is really ransomware. And I think really the conversation at the keynote is going to be, thinking about cyber risk and how do you improve resiliency given where we are in today's world, post the pandemic or in the pandemic, and how has that changed sort of the landscape from a cyber risk perspective.
I want to return to ransomware in just a moment, but just flesh out for me a little bit about why this topic is so important now at this juncture, either in pandemic or as we move post-pandemic. What I wonder has changed.
I think it's an excellent question. I mean, if we think about cyber risk, you think about the integration of technology within companies. You think about the fourth industrial revolution that's been coming for a number of years, artificial intelligence, blockchain, the proliferation of devices, the Internet of Things. The attack surface, I think, has just increased exponentially in the last number of years. And I think really what's changed is, to a degree, the pandemic. I think the pandemic has really shifted many organizations to change the way they operate and really shift to a remote workforce. So, if I take Marsh as a global organization as an example, I think in the beginning of the pandemic, in the space of 2 weeks, we shifted circa 70,000 colleagues from being in the office, in 140 countries to now all working from home. And I think that challenge has really seen a dramatic change, and I think has fueled a lot of the increase, in particularly ransomware, but in cyber as well. I mean, you've increased the attack surface. Companies are now doing things they've never done before. So the whole landscape has changed, and I think fundamentally, that's been one of the reasons that I think cyber now is maybe more critical in the current circumstances than it was, let's say, 1 or 2 years ago. Sorry, I was going to say, and we see it in the data. I mean, you want to come back to ransomware, but if we look year on year, ransomware attacks have increased by over 148%. And that just talks, I think, a little bit in terms of what we're thinking and what we're seeing in the current environment.
Why has there been this uptick in ransomware attack?
I think it's an interesting debate. I mean, it's definitely the attack surfaces have increased, as we've highlighted, I think, because of the pandemic. And there's a lot more, ability, a lot more data that's at risk, a lot more different access points to get into that information. And I just think it's something that, the criminal element or hackers have seen the ability that, if they can take data, we definitely seen, more ransomware attacks, and it's just fundamentally because of the attack surface being increased. But also what we're seeing is a real increase in sort of the quantum of the ransomware demands. I think historically, ransomware demands weren't significant in size, but nowadays, demands of $10 million and upwards, are not rare, and we're seeing it. And I guess the challenge is, is payment a guarantee that your stolen data will be returned? And I guess that's a very interesting debate if you think about it from a company's perspective. Do you pay the ransomware? Don't you pay the ransomware? And I guess it comes down to how prepared you are as an organization, sort of on two levels. Firstly, your initial defense perimeter. And then secondly, the integrity of your data. And I think if you're properly prepared, you have options then when you have a ransomware attack in terms of how you choose to deal with it as an organization.
I want to come back to defensive strategy in just a moment, but we've been talking about this globally. Just a quick perspective on South Africa. What is the situation like in terms of cyber attacks? I'm assuming we probably mirror the rest of the globe.
Yeah, spot on. Yeah, we mirror the rest of the globe. I think we are, you look at our financial services industry, you look at our mining industry, by themselves, world-class industries, but we mirror the globe. We're following the same trends. I think we're seeing large companies being targeted. I mean, in the press last week, there was a government department that got targeted. So we just seen it. We totally mirror what's happening in the world. And again, I think we can debate whether we're more at risk in terms of our preparedness. But ultimately, I think, we're in there and we're front and center, and it should be a key priority for every organization in the country.
So a key priority for any organization, and obviously the secret then is to have a competent strategy in these changed circumstances. We all agree on that. Where do you start, though?
I think you've got to think about it in layers. If you think about sort of security in your own home, you have different layers. You have your outside beams, then you have your door contacts, then you have your cameras. No one solution in isolation provides you a bulletproof solution. And it's the same situation when you think about cyber. You've got to layer on different levels of protection. You've got to think about your physical protection. You've got to then think about your policies as they relate to bring your own devices. You've got to think about training your staff in terms of what to look for when there's phishing attacks, what to look for when there's scouting attacks. And then you've got to overlay elements like risk management and cyber insurance. And sort of that complete package puts organizations in a more resilient position than if they just do one thing. So it's got to be that layering of different technologies and different facets of security, Jeremy.
As you rightly say, this is a critical threat facing corporate South Africa. It's going to be dealt with in much more detail at the upcoming IRMSA conference on the 29th and the 30th of September. To key sponsor from Marsh Africa, Chief Executive Officer Spiros Fatouros, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you for having me.